Prince Lev Mishkin had just finished lunch with Madame Yupatchin and her daughters when he shared the story of an acquaintance who was condemned to death by firing squad. He recounts the final moments of the man's life. He had about 5 minutes left to live, not more. He said those 5 minutes felt like an endless time to him, an enormous wealth. He reckoned up the time for bidding his comrades farewell and allotted 2 minutes to that, then allotted 2 more minutes to thinking about himself for the last time, and then quickly looking around for the last time. He was dying at the age of 27, healthy and strong. But the man didn't die, and at the very last minute he was granted a pardon for his crimes and convictions. The story of Prince Mishkin isn't a true one, but a work of fiction encapsulated in The Idiot, a novel written by the man who lived through the mock execution his character described, Fyodor Dostoevsky. On the 11th of November in 1821 Moscow, Fyodor Dostoevsky, the illustrious philosopher, renowned thinker, and perhaps the greatest novelist of all time, was born. Dostoevsky grew up in an Orthodox Christian household, on the hospital grounds of which his father, a successful doctor, worked. But a life that seemingly promised hail, affluence, and fortune was a mere deception for the reality that awaited. In his teen years, Dostoevsky's mother died of tuberculosis, and his father was likely murdered. Dostoevsky's proximity to the hospital conditions, upbringing in a strong faith, and the deaths of both his parents in his early life are likely traumatic facets of his subconscious, later influencing his work. After a woeful and depressing childhood, Dostoevsky graduated from the Military Engineering Technical Institute in St. Petersburg, Russia, later becoming an engineer, an occupation that in no way pertained to literature or humanities. And in the absence of his passions, Dostoevsky's work as an engineer left him feeling ineffectual and unsatisfied. He left his engineering position in the Russian army to pursue a career in literature. By 1845, his epistolary short novel, Poor Folk, had been published in the periodical The Contemporary. It was deemed Russia's first social novel. Unfortunately, the great acclaim would not subsist in Dostoevsky's subsequent work. Likely due to feelings of failure and financial distress, Dostoevsky joined a radical group of utopian socialists called the Petrozhevsky Krug in 1847. Dostoevsky's affiliation eventually precipitated his arrest and imprisonment in 1849, where he was sentenced to death by a firing squad on December 22nd of that same year. But as he stood with a gun to his head and minutes left to live, he was pardoned. The execution was never intended to eventuate and was a mere attempt at psychological manipulation in order to scare the other prisoners. He was instead sent to a work camp in Siberia, returning to St. Petersburg 4 years later, a very different man. His following novels, The Idiot, Notes from Underground, Crime and Punishment, and The Brothers Karamazov, penetrated into the deepest recesses of the human psyche, all exploring a similar theme of suffering and the twisted predilection humans hold towards it. The conscious mind may convince us that happiness is our deepest aspiration, but our history and habits prove otherwise. While a plethora of traumatic moments in Dostoevsky's life likely accumulated to engender his profoundly pessimistic interpretations of the human psyche, there's a single moment in Dostoevsky's life that stands out as a catalyst for his lugubrious cognizance, which unfolded seconds before it was supposed to end. Recalling his mock execution through The Idiot, Dostoevsky writes, "The ignorance of and loathing for this new thing that would be, and would come presently, were terrible. Yet, he said that nothing was more oppressive to him at that moment than the constant thought, what if I were not to die? What if life were given back to me? What infinity? And it would be all mine. Then I'd turn each minute into a whole age. I'd lose nothing. I'd reckon up every moment separately. I'd let nothing be wasted." He said that in the end, this thought turned into such anger in him that he wished they would just hurry up and shoot him. Dostoevsky expresses his own emotions and comes to an important realization. Despite living amongst a species that desires its own anguish and torment, in a world that is so often diabolically tragic, the idea of being exiled from it is so overwhelmingly horrible that one would literally rather die than steep into the knowledge of just how beautiful the world really is. Fyodor Dostoevsky isn't a philosopher that fits into any one category. He isn't an optimist for obvious reasons, nor could he be called a nihilist as a devout Orthodox Christian. He is simply a man who surmised a complicated elucidation of what it meant to be a human through his tragic experience as one. And whether you agree with his obscure philosophy or disaccord with his notion of the human condition, Fyodor Dostoevsky will invariably remain one of the most preeminent novelists to walk this despicable yet beautiful earth of which we all live.